So I've been looking forward to this one. We're going to talk about SEO, the future, how e-commerce brands can keep their product content visible with Google LLMs and everything that is going on right now.
Mm.
And I have Dan with me here, who is an expert on SEO.
Yeah, thanks, Morten. Nice to be here. So I'm Dan. I'm a senior SEO consultant here at Brave Bison. We're a full service digital marketing agency covering everything from sort of social to PPC and SEO. So SEO is kind of where I sit on the technical team, working predominantly with e-commerce websites over the last sort of 7+ years. And yeah, excited to get into it today.
You know,
Mhm.
ChatGPT, Google Shopping. How do we prepare now, Dan? What do we do? This is a big
Yeah,
topic.
it is. Yeah, it's a big time to be in kind of e-commerce and SEO. I think with all the changes that are happening. I mean, SEO is a constantly evolving landscape, but I think the changes we've kind of seen over the last couple of years and are likely to see over the next few years are maybe some of the biggest. In terms of how to prepare now, I think, for me, focusing on like the fundamentals of SEO is really important. I think, there's kind of two ends to the spectrum with this stuff. There's sort of the AI skeptics who are sort of trying to bury their head in the sand, and that's definitely not a good place to be. But I do think there's also a lot of noise and maybe a little bit of panic in this space as well. And I think kind of what we really need to do is sort of focus on the core stuff we would do as part of our SEO, like good website structure, good kind of product data, helpful content, and kind of building a strong online brand. So yeah, I think if you're already kind of really nailing the SEO fundamentals, you're in a good spot. However, there may be just some things we need to kind of adapt and tweak as we see more AI on
Yeah.
the seeps.
Can you? I know that you've been researching a little bit about how AI works and how it works compared to SEO. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, if we start with like kind of how SEO works, obviously in SEO we always talk about Google. Obviously, it's not the only search engine out there, but it is by far the largest. And the way kind of Google sort of ranks content or sort of product pages is really looking at, yes, there are on-site signals with sort of your content quality and all the other stuff that we know about. But we know links play a really big role as well. Whereas for, I guess, AI and LLMs, it's a little bit different where things like product copy are still important, good product data are still important, but links are still important in the sense that it's people talking about your brand, but don't necessarily need them to be linking to you. You just kind of need to way people sort of talk about you online. So with sort of Google, there's kind of a very strict algorithm, I suppose, that focuses on a lot of links and stuff. With AI, I think it's going to be a bit more conversational. It's a lot more personalized to what the chat model knows about you personally, like what your ChatGPT profile kind of knows about you as the user, um, and what you're saying about yourself online and what others are saying about you online is also going to get really played into it as well.
And I saw an interesting thing from ChatGPT. They launched it, actually was 2 weeks ago, about,
Mm.
or even more. But they launched this product registration sheet. So where you have to like register your products, and
Mm.
then they will, I guess, index that and use that. That is super interesting.
Yeah.
I can already see the ads coming, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of eerily similar to, I suppose, the way Google Merchant Center and kind of you think about sort of the Google shopping graph and all that kind of stuff it's kind of similar to that. Um, I suppose maybe the reason they're strict on doing this, obviously, you can submit products to Google through the Merchant Center, but Google's also quite good at sort of crawling and indexing content. That's kind of like their big superpower, I guess. Whereas I suppose maybe where ChatGPT or OpenAI are still a little bit in their infancy with that, maybe that's why they're kind of encouraging users to upload things to this listing. And like you say, I'm sure eventually ads will follow because they've announced some pretty big revenue targets, and I don't really see how else they can get there other than with ads. But yeah.
No, and also speaking of the crawler, I also saw from ChatGPT they have like a recommendation on how to set the robot TXT
Yeah.
so that it accepts their crawler.
Yeah.
So
I think there was
they're
like,
that's also
also gone.
important.
Yeah. I think there was like a bit of a panic a little while ago and people started blocking their content from AI. I think they were worried about AI would steal their content and show it to users without crediting them. So some people may have sort of, I don't know, jumped the gun and panicked a little bit and blocked things like OpenAI crawlers from their website. But if as more users kind of go over, you really do need ChatGPT to be able to crawl your website. So making sure that you're not blocking their bots or anything is definitely an important step to take.
So as a summary here on this question, you're saying that, the things you did with preparing for SEO 2 years ago still
Mhm.
apply.
I think I'd say getting like the fundamentals of SEO, i.e., crawlable content, make sure sort of crawlers can crawl, render, index your content. Make sure you've got good content on your product pages, which is helpful for users and is structured in a way that's easy to understand both for bots and real world users. Building like a good online reputation, this is all stuff you should hopefully be doing as part of your SEO strategy now. That is definitely going to put you in good stead for AI. But there's also some other things we need to consider, such as rising personalization, making sure that OpenAI bots can also crawl your site, because obviously there's some slight differences there. And also, just a bigger focus on online reputation.
What do you call AI SEO? Do you call it AIO or do you call it LLMO or what do you call it? I've seen so many
Uh,
definitions of that.
I've got a little bit of personal beef about this. I think the kind of rebranding of SEO is maybe a little bit gimmicky, in my opinion. Like lots of people kind of rushing to sort of establish themselves as an expert in this. I think it ultimately comes down to rebranding. SEO at its core is just increasing your visibility for people searching for things online, whether that's through Google or ChatGPT or whatever else. That is kind of what SEO is. If people want to sort of rebrand it as AEO or LLM, EO or whatever other letters they want to add to it, then I don't know. I think it's a little bit more marketing than sort of genuine, in my opinion.
That was interesting. Let's move on to the next question, I think. So, we're playing playing into this. Is then SEO still worth it? Is it we were just scratching the surface on it? How is it changing? Is it still worth doing the way we have?
Yeah, I think as long as people are searching for things online, SEO will always be worth it. As we kind of covered in the first section, a lot of the core things you should be doing as part of your SEO strategy look like they should still apply in AI. Obviously, things are constantly evolving, but everything we know up till this point, it looks like a lot of the core stuff with SEO translates over pretty well. I think we also need to consider the fact that one of the number one correlations between performing well in a lot of these AI and LLM models is also ranking well organically. We did some testing with a tool called Perplexity, I think it was. And like the number one thing was if sites are performing well in SEO, they're also getting mentioned quite frequently in like ChatGPT and other things. So I think SEO is still worth it. I think you also have to consider that, yes, AI usage is definitely growing and I think set to continue to grow, but traditional search still definitely makes up the majority of online searches. So completely sort of turning away from SEO at this point, I think maybe a little bit premature. Definitely still worth it in my opinion. Obviously I'm biased though.
Absolutely, but it's also merging, right? Because
Yeah.
if you go to Google now, you will automatically do an AI search.
Yeah.
Like, that's just by default in Google.
Yeah.
So, so it's a whole new world also there out there.
Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, there's definitely some changes coming in. And like you say, it's something we're not going to be able to get away from. But if we're kind of, I guess, including SEO as like the umbrella term for optimizing for online search, and we are, saying that things like AEO or LLMO or whatever kind of come under this umbrella, then obviously it's still worth it because it's targeting people searching online.
Yeah, but my point is that
Mm.
SEO is AIO also,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
So that's what people are not getting. They're thinking that it's going to be replaced, but it's actually the overlap is huge.
yeah, yeah. I agree completely. I think we're kind of in alignment on this one.
Let's jump to the next one and see if there is anything interesting to talk about there. Can you trust AI with product content? That we'll always talk about using AI for everything, but it cooks down to trust also. In Bluestone, we've sort of looked more into that whole trust thing with with what we call AI consensus, where we use multiple models to come up with answers also. But what's your take on this?
Yeah, so I think we're sort of shifting into, I guess, using AI in the actual processes of doing SEO. And like the short answer would be yes, if you're doing it correctly. But I think there is like a big yes if there. If you're just kind of relying quite heavily on AI or taking quite a basic approach where you're maybe just using one model and you're using like very basic prompts and leaving it quite open, and you've not got a robust QA process on the other side of it, then I think you are definitely opening yourself up to some risks of issues with your product content. So you definitely need to take steps. Make sure that you're looking at a few different models, like you kind of mentioned. Setting up a good briefing process, so you're incorporating things like tone of voice. You're kind of setting the way you want the content to be structured. You may also consider feeding in your own product data rather than kind of relying on a model to go out and find information elsewhere where it might take something that isn't actually relevant. And I do think you do still need sort of a human element on the final end of it, just sort of QAing and making sure that the final output is what you want it to be. So yeah, yes, if is kind of the answer to that
Yeah.
question, I guess.
And I think that people also need to think about that great answers come from great questions.
Mm.
So you have to be like really careful with your prompts and what you actually ask for. And as long as you put a lot of work into that, uh, that sort of mitigates some of the trust problems there. And
Yeah.
also, I think that this whole thing coming out now with AI consensus, I think that is super strong.
Mm.
For example, in Bluestone PIM now we have we you can use GPT to generate or enrich a product, and then you can use Gemini to check that makes sense. And once you have that sort of dual check,
Yeah.
I think that's also a thing. And also always a human in the loop is also always or for the next couple of years at least,
At least.
we'll
Yeah.
need a
Well.
human
Yeah. Maybe not for much longer,
in
but
the loop.
we'll see.
And an interesting thing on this with product content, I see there's such a big difference between clients also, because some of our clients are really scared about scared about this, and they're like, "Ooh, we have to, we have to have a human loop. We have to check everything." Of course, it depends on your your products. I mean,
Mm.
if you're selling food with allergens,
Yeah.
you have to get it right, right? But then we see other clients. I just had a chat with a client earlier this week, and they
Mm.
were like, "Just bring it on,
Yeah.
AI is doing fine. AI can do everything, and then we'll just catch, the ones that missed the mark at the end." So they have like an opposite approach. So it is like a big difference with your product also. If you
Mm.
have like super simple, straightforward products, and it
Mm.
really doesn't matter, then it's very different than if you're selling, medicine or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I think I think you've definitely raised a good point there, that considering the kind of niche that you sit in or your vertical, and kind of maybe tailoring your approach for that, or being sort of more careful or less careful if you need to. I also think something that is well worth doing if you're kind of using product content is to make sure you're A/B testing this kind of stuff. Like maybe trial it on a
Good
section of
point.
URLs and see how they perform. And then you can kind of tweak your prompts or tweak your approach however you need to. But I guess we're getting more into kind of the performance side of things there.
Okay, let's jump to the next one and see what we have there.
Mm.
The traditional keyword research. So
Mm.
now we're talking more about the research behind it, than just actually like doing the work. But what is your what are your recommendation when it comes to the research behind it?
Yeah,
Still
so I
useful?
think keyword research is one of those really variable things in SEO. I think, yeah, at a basic level, sometimes you speak to clients, they kind of think that keyword research is just sort of producing a long list of, you know, mildly relevant keywords, and then kind of looking at the search volume and going for the ones with the highest volume. And that's not really what keyword research should be. You should be going much deeper into your keyword research and kind of considering relevancy to your brand, where you kind of sit within SERPs and what kind of people think about you. You also kind of need to map those keywords to, I guess, intent, or sort of, put them into sort of topical clusters. So you're not just thinking about, oh, we want to rank for this specific keyword. You're kind of using that and sort of grouping things together to really look at a particular topic area and working out what types of pages you need. So keyword research is still useful, but I think it kind of needs to be thought of as a tool in your arsenal, rather than, setting a bunch of targets for, oh, you want to rank for this specific keyword or that specific keyword. Because not only is the topical way more kind of relevant for AI, I think that old kind of method of tracking visibility for specific keywords is going to get really hard as we kind of see the SERPs change with AI models as well. So still useful, but it needs to change.
But I can also imagine that doing the actual research, utilizing AI for the research itself, is super useful. As long as you have some strong prompts there, you can probably do really a lot of work when it comes to the research. With a few lines of or a few prompts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've been kind of playing around with this at the agency as well, and it definitely speeds up the process of keyword research. It's and even things like sort of like I mentioned earlier, like grouping is, I think, maybe the biggest time save that I found with AI. Is you can kind of feed it your list of keywords and get it to categorize stuff, and you can also feed it sort of ranking data, so what's kind of performing there, and it will look at sort of common pages appearing and kind of help you understand maybe what content you need to create to target those topical clusters. By embedding AI into your keyword research process is definitely a good way to kind of speed things up.
Have you tested different models on that? Is there a favorite model that works better for that kind of research? Do you use reasoning models or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, we sort of bounce between. I think we kind of bounce around trying things with Claude or ChatGPT. We've also got a couple of tools that we use, like Keyword Insights AI, which kind of has some interesting stuff powered there. There's some interesting tools we use. I don't know if we necessarily play around with models as such. Yeah.
Well, I could just imagine, being an AI nerd, I can just imagine that a reasoning model or a deep research model would perform really well on this topic if you made the right prompt.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, cool. I love this topic here. Let's jump to the next one. I mean, that's what do we do now? What's a smart move for Q4? Looking right in front of us, what should we do now, and maybe also, what should we do later?
Yeah. So I think, to sort of answer this question correctly, you kind of need to do a full assessment of where you are currently. So kind of compare your website against those kind of like fundamental SEO things. So checking that all your content is crawlable and indexable. You'd be surprised how many sites I sort of look at that have issues with this, where maybe they've, particularly e-commerce, where you can get some really big websites, or if you're using like a headless CMS or something and you're maybe relying on quite a lot of client-side rendering, you sort of take it for granted that search it like Google and other kind of bots can sort of crawl your website efficiently. It's not actually always the case. So really make sure that your website is kind of accessible from that perspective. And then from there, making sure you've got, again, really good sort of content and sort of product data on your product pages. Again, I think this is something that sounds quite simple, but actually when you try and scale it on a large e-commerce website, isn't always the case. It can be quite difficult. And then you also kind of need to think about your brand online reputation. So, are you kind of engaging relevant publishers? What are people saying in sort of review sections about you on things like Trustpilot or Google reviews or whatever else it might be? I think you really need to kind of take stock of where your strengths and weaknesses are against sort of a fundamental SEO strategy, and then start looking at that. And then, if you want to start thinking AI as well, some of the stuff we talked about in terms of making sure that, LLMs can crawl the content on your website is going to be important as well.
Yeah. This is super interesting. And I think AI is changing, you know, this a lot. Might be the fundamentals that you need to have that down. Also, what do you think about, just content creation in itself? Because many people are saying that, websites are sort of dead. Why should I put effort into making websites if people are not going to even look at it? I mean,
Yeah. I think you've kind of touched on a good point there that we maybe should have mentioned with e-commerce, is that it's possible that some of the, I guess, browsing behavior and exploratory behavior that happens currently on websites. So when you think about users coming to sort of product listing pages or to sort of blog pages or whatever, and then kind of browsing through your website to eventually find the product they want to purchase, it may be that AI kind of streamlines that process, and we end up seeing a lot more direct traffic to PDPs. So maybe some of the focus in your sort of content strategy does shift more to those product display pages. But ultimately, from what we've seen so far, users will still need eventually to land on the website and make a purchase, at least for now. Obviously, that could change. Maybe you will be able to do sort of direct checkout from the AI sort of.
I think that's where we're going. Agent to agent shopping. It will
Yeah.
change everything. But at least for, I guess, for all us men, when we, at least me, when I do shopping, I don't care if my toilet paper comes from this place or that place, or the milk, just get it to my doorstep every now and then when I need it. That would be great. Yeah, but I think it's gonna be interesting to see
Mm.
what will happen.
Yeah, but I mean, you still, even if it's coming from sort of the agent or the AI, at the moment at least, it still looks like it would need to surface that data from your website. I know you mentioned earlier about ChatGPT opening up like product feeds and things like that, where you can upload the product data directly in. But I think if you're going to kind of automate that process and sort of generate that product content to feed in, it almost makes sense to have the website there as well, because there will still
Yeah,
be people who
I
prefer to
you
go online.
definitely, at least for the next 5 years, will
Yeah.
need to be there. So I've seen that in my experience that um, third parties like Gartner or G2 or all these trusted uh, third parties, or Forrester, who
Mm.
that AI puts a lot of weight into their opinion about you. Also, is
Yeah.
that something that you also see?
Yeah, definitely. I think that kind of comes back to what people are saying about your brand um, online. Yeah, I think I can't remember his name, but the kind of lead product person at ChatGPT was saying that's going to feature heavily in LLMs is essentially what people are saying about you. So yeah, kind of managing that online reputation and kind of building a sort of reputable brand still is definitely going to carry
Yeah, I
weight.
think that's something that I think we people need to think more about the brand reputation, really, and that will be heavily weighted or heavily um, evaluated by the LLMs, and yeah, that will also keep your rank high. I found I did an exercise that I think was really interesting. I asked GPT to rank, what is the best PIM to buy, uh, and it came up with a rank, and then I queried that quite deep and hard on how did you get there, why, and I think that exercise is something that everyone should do. Because that was truly interesting to see, and it was also very fascinating to see how it works with different models. It's very different, the response from the different models.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my sort of a ninja move for Q4 that everyone
Yeah.
should do.
Yeah.
Any last recommendations, or do you think we covered that?
No, I think that is kind of my main recommendation, is just make sure you're, as I said, sort of covering the main SEO points. Start sort of getting curious about AI and, like you say, playing around and maybe engaging with ChatGPT and asking questions about, or asking relevant questions within your vertical, like what is the best PIM model or whatever. Um, and yeah, I think it's a case of make sure you're doing the kind of core stuff you need to do, and then kind of staying curious and open, because things are changing at quite a rapid pace, and I think the need to adapt is pretty clear.
I think that was perfect, Dan. Thank you for joining me here today. And this was super interesting. Yeah, thanks for the talk, and we'll leave it at that.
No worries. Thanks for having me on.